I remember the sound of my sister's laughter echoing down the hotel hallway the night before her wedding, and how, even then, something inside me went quiet. It wasn't jealousy, it wasn't bitterness, it was something colder, like a draft slipping under a closed door, touching the back of my ankles when I wasn't looking. I told myself it was nerves. Weddings do that to people. They stir up old memories, old comparisons, old sacrifices you pretend didn't cost you much, until you're standing alone in a hallway at midnight holding a garment bag that isn't even yours, wondering how your life became someone else's stepping stone. Before all of this, my life was ordinary in the most comforting way. I'd been married to Daniel for 17 years, not the kind of marriage people brag about online, but steady, predictable, the kind where you know how the other person takes their coffee and which creaky floorboard to avoid at night. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house with beige walls I'd always meant to repaint. Our son was already in college, our daughter finishing her last year of high school. Life had settled into that quieter season, where the days blend, but the peace feels earned. And then there was my sister, Lily. Lily was 9 years younger than me. Growing up, people used to say I was born responsible and she was born beautiful. I learned early how to pack lunches and fold laundry. Lily learned how to smile and have doors opened for her. Our mother passed when Lily was still a teenager, and somewhere along the way, I became more than just a sister. I became a safety net. I helped her through community college, let her crash on our couch when her first serious boyfriend broke her heart, co-signed a loan I probably shouldn't have. Daniel never complained, not openly at least. He'd just sigh sometimes when Lily's name came up, the way people do when they feel something but don't know how to articulate it without sounding cruel. She just needs time, I'd always say. She's finding her way. When Lily met Marcus, I thought, finally, someone else would take the baton. Marcus was charming in a polished way, worked in sales, always dressed well, called me sis with an easy grin that felt practiced. Lily glowed around him. She called me late at night whispering about venues and colors, and how she wanted a wedding that felt like a fresh start. The problem was, fresh starts are expensive. Marcus had debts he brushed off with jokes. Lily's savings were thin, and so, one quiet evening at our kitchen table, after the kids had gone to bed and the dishwasher hummed in the background, Daniel and I made a decision that would change everything. "We can help," I said, already knowing the answer I wanted. Daniel looked at me for a long moment. His eyes were tired, older than they used to be. "If we do this," he said carefully, "it has to be the last time." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "It will be." I meant it, or maybe I just needed to believe it. We paid for the venue, the dress, the catering. I dipped into savings I'd quietly set aside for years. Money meant for emergencies, or maybe a future trip Daniel and I always talked about but never planned. I told myself it was worth it. Family is family, and Lily deserved a beautiful beginning after so many false starts. The months leading up to the wedding were a blur of errands and lists and phone calls. I went with Lily to fittings, sat patiently while she twirled in front of mirrors, tears pooling in her eyes. "You're basically my mom," she said once, half laughing, half crying as I zipped her in ivory satin. I smiled, my throat burned. Daniel came to a few planning meetings when Marcus couldn't. He offered to help move decorations, fix things last minute. Lily hugged Daniel a little too long sometimes, but I brushed it off. She'd always been affectionate, and Daniel was family. The night before the wedding, the hotel smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and cheap champagne. Lily knocked on my door close to midnight, barefoot, hair still curled. "I can't sleep," she said, flopping onto the bed. "What if everything goes wrong?" "Something always goes wrong," I told her gently, "but it'll still be your day." She smiled at the ceiling, then turned her head toward me. "I don't know what I'd do without you." I kissed her forehead, the way I used to when she was a teenager crying over breakups. "You won't have to," I said. "You've got Marcus now." She didn't answer right away, just stared at the ceiling, chewing her lip. I should have noticed then, the pause, the way her eyes flickered like she was holding something back. But weddings make everyone strange. That's what I told myself. The ceremony the next day was beautiful. Lily walked down the aisle glowing, her dress fitting perfectly. Marcus wiped away a tear at the altar. I sat beside Daniel, holding his hand, feeling proud, relieved, like I'd finally done my part. At the reception, Lily hugged me tightly. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." I hugged her back. "Be happy," I said. "That's all I ever wanted." It was late when we finally got back to our own house. The kids were staying with friends. Daniel kicked off his shoes and loosened his tie. "You did good," he said quietly. I smiled. "We did." That night, as I lay awake listening to the familiar rhythm of his breathing beside me, I felt something like closure, like a chapter had ended. I had no idea what I'd really paid for wasn't a wedding, but an ending I never saw coming. The weeks after the wedding were quieter than I expected. I thought Lily would call every day, bubbling with stories about married life, complaints about dishes left in the sink, or Marcus's socks on the floor. Instead, days passed without a word. When she did call, her voice sounded distracted, like she was always halfway out the door. "Everything okay?" I asked once, stirring soup at the stove, the smell of onions and garlic filling the kitchen. "Yeah, just busy," she said quickly. "You know how it is." I did know how it was, or at least I thought I did. Daniel, on the other hand, seemed lighter. That was the first thing I noticed. He hummed sometimes while shaving, took longer routes home from work. He said Lily had texted him to thank him again for everything, and I felt a small glow of pride that she still appreciated us. But then there were the little things, the things you don't point out because they sound ridiculous when you say them out loud. Daniel started keeping his phone face down on the counter. Not always, just enough for me to notice. He volunteered to run errands he used to complain about. And once, when I came into the living room unexpectedly, he jumped like I'd caught him doing something wrong. "Just reading the news," he said too quickly, locking his screen. I laughed it off. "You look guilty." "Do I?" He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. I told myself I was imagining things. After all, I was tired, emotionally drained. Weddings have a way of pulling old threads loose. Still, a restlessness settled in my chest. Lily came over one afternoon unannounced, a few weeks after the wedding. I was folding laundry, the TV murmuring in the background. "You look good," I said, genuinely surprised. She'd lost weight, or maybe she just carried herself differently now, more confidence, less softness. "So do you," she replied, scanning the room. Her eyes lingered down the hallway toward the bedroom. "Daniel's still at work," I said without thinking. "Oh, I wasn't looking for him," she said, a little too fast. Marcus is out of town and I didn't want to be alone." I set the towels aside. "Of course, you can stay as long as you like." She perched on the edge of the couch, twisting her wedding ring around her finger. We talked about nothing, weather, traffic, a show she'd started watching, but there was a tension in her shoulders, like she was bracing for something. When she finally left, she hugged me tightly, too tightly. "You okay?" I asked, pulling back with a smile. "Yeah, just tired." After she drove away, I stood at the window longer than necessary, watching the street. The house felt different, like the air had shifted. That evening, Daniel came home later than usual. "Traffic," he said, loosening his tie. "I grabbed dinner on the way." I nodded, though I'd made his favorite, roast chicken, lemon and thyme. It sat untouched in the oven, cooling. That night, I lay awake again, listening, waiting. For what? I didn't know. The first crack came from somewhere I didn't expect. My daughter Emily was the one who said it. We were sitting at the kitchen table one Saturday morning, pancakes between us. She scrolled through her phone, frowning. "Mom," she said, "is Aunt Lily mad at you?" I laughed. "Why would she be?" She hesitated. Teenagers have a way of sensing when to tread lightly. She posted something weird, and Uncle Daniel liked it, like right away. My stomach tightened. "What kind of weird?" Emily slid her phone across the table. It was a photo of Lily's hand, her wedding ring catching the light, resting on a coffee cup. The caption read, "Some connections never fade." It was vague, innocent even, but something about it felt pointed, intimate. I forced a smile. "Social media nonsense," I said. "People post all kinds of things." Emily shrugged. "Just thought it was odd." After she left the room, I picked up my own phone. I scrolled Lily's page slowly, noticing things I hadn't before, how often Daniel's name appeared in the likes, how sometimes his comments came before Marcus's, if Marcus commented at all. That night, when Daniel fell asleep, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. I told myself to stop, that this was how paranoia began, connecting dots that weren't meant to touch. But doubt, once planted, grows quietly. A few days later, I went to return a dress at the mall. As I walked past a cafe, I caught a familiar laugh, Lily's laugh, light and breathy, the one she'd had since childhood. I stopped. Through the window, I saw her sitting at a corner table, with Daniel. They leaned toward each other, heads close. Daniel smiled in a way I hadn't seen in years. Not the tired, polite smile he gave me at the end of long days, but something softer, something private. I stood frozen, my reflection superimposed over their faces. The cafe smelled of coffee and sugar, even through the glass. I told myself there was an explanation. Of course there was. Family meeting, planning something, a surprise. Then Lily reached across the table and touched his hand.